What's going on, you loyal listeners? Thank you for tuning in to the L Squared Podcast. I'm your host here, Luke Larson, and joining me today, again, virtually, electronically, I don't know how many other ways I can emphasize that he's not in the same room as me right now, but it's the fan favorite, Old Legs. What's going on, Old Legs?
How we doing? I just want to point out that we will not be live tweeting
During this.
Yeah, we are going to be showing it as is.
As is. With you on our home computers.
Yes.
Well,
yes,
again, thanks guys for tuning in. The last time you heard from us, we were at the prestigious South Dakota Film Festival, and
lots of fun.
So much fun. And I think it's safe to say that we are the official podcast of the South Dakota Film Festival.
Boom.
Boom.
We did it.
We did it. That's it. So we just want to let you guys know that we peaked, and it's just kind of downhill from here.
Yeah, this is more. This is just going to be more of a kind of a PR announcement. You will be hearing from us, next year. That will be our next show.
Yeah. We're not going to try and taint it with any other ones. We're just going to... We don't want to do another show unless it's on that level.
Before we sign out here?
No, I think that should be it.
All right.
I'll just play the outro.
Once again, I'd like to thank all the people.
Yeah, for letting this happen. No, enough of that noise. No, but the festival, honestly, huge shout. Thank you so much to Thomas Black and Diane Sundstrom for letting us come out and interview the people. We had great talks with Jenna Sorali and David Mayer and Quinn Costello. So many great films. If you guys are in the circuit, straight up, please look these films up, find them. For sure, go back and listen to those episodes because they were all phenomenal, and we're planning on having a couple more here coming up. But seriously, go support those guys. They make great work, and it's smaller films, and they were gracious enough to be awesome guests for us. So the least we can do is just go out and support them and show them love. You feel me?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I just gotta echo everything that you said. I mean, everyone was incredibly gracious, and the South Dakota Film Festival, it's a growing festival, but I think everyone there is 100% a professional, and these are people that are working every single day, and we were I mean people have gone on to make pretty incredible stuff, alumni at the South Dakota Film Festival.
Yeah, for sure.
Chloe Zhao,
right,
doing a Marvel movie next year. There you go. What else do we need to say?
That's the biggest you can get.
It's a real thing, and I was really excited to, be able to swing up there with you and get a chance to meet some people. And yeah, we had a great time. So we're looking forward to being there next year. And
yeah, and everybody talked about when we were there. Everybody said this is the best festival to go to because it's just the community is just so real and so supportive there, and they put on just a great festival with the movies, but then all the other stuff, the events they have after parties, they have that great green room for VIPs. I mean, they do it the right way, and it was just, like you said, we were really honored to be a part of that, and we're excited to keep doing it, man. But all that aside, now the official podcast of the South Dakota Film Festival brings you the L Squared Podcast. So on a previous episode, before we went up to the festival, we had talked about, we were excited for Hold the Dark, and we kind of talked about how Netflix works, and I was very confused, which was a good chunk of that episode was just me confused about how Netflix makes money, which I'm sure was great audio for people. But since then, Hold the Dark has come out, and we both seen it, and we haven't really talked about it yet. So like, I know we're both big fans of Jeremy Saulnier. So like, Old Legs, like what are your thoughts on it?
So, I guess you know my thoughts about Netflix projects in general. I've been a tad jaded. Just I feel like the hype is really difficult to live up to, and with this one, I thought, well, who knows? Like, I really enjoyed Green Room, Blue Ruin, both, fabulous films, in their own right. And so Hold the Dark, it stars Jeffrey Wright, Riley Keough, Alexander Skarsgård, who's playing Alexander Skarsgård, who has never cracked a joke in any scene of any film that he has ever been in.
Right.
So he holds, true to form here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Jeffrey Wright plays a character who's tasked with, solving the disappearance of kids that were taken by wolves in Alaska, I believe. It's
Yep.
kind of backcountry Alaska. And so we saw the trailer, we talked about it, we're like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think initially through the first, I want to say 30 minutes or so of this film, like I was all in. I felt the tension, I felt the isolation. I'm a really big fan of Riley Keough. I can't think of something that I really that she's been bad in. Man, she just does really good work.
Yeah.
And totally holds up here. She has probably the most memorable scene of the film where she's, she goes from, she invites Jeffrey Taylor into her house, go find my kids, yada, yada. Something's clearly not, all there with her, but, the next scene, Jeffrey Wright's waking up and she's, walking around her house naked with a wolf mask on.
Yeah. That was interesting.
At that point, I was like, wow, this movie's going for it, and it's great.
You're like, I'm in.
But I thought this film kind of lost some steam. The Alexander Skarsgård character is interesting. Plays a war veteran who's coming home. Find out that his kids are gone. There's some kind of abandonment between both him and his wife, Riley Keough's character. I don't know, what did you think without really giving away the movie? It's an ambiguous ending, so we can.
Yeah.
There's not a whole ton to spoil here, but I was a bit let down. It didn't quite hold the tension like some of Jeremy Saulnier's other projects had, where it's he raises that bar right off the bat, and then he holds the gas pedal for the entirety of the film. That was Green Room. Blue Ruin's a bit more of a slow burn, but I don't know. What did you think? I haven't heard some inside baseball here. I have no idea what you thought of this film.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar boat as you. Like, I think this is probably my least favorite of Jeremy's films. And that's not to say it was bad. I mean, it's very well shot. It's Jeffrey Wright, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Jeffrey Wright was really good, had a great beard. And, right away I was like, okay, not really much character development. We're just starting off with this guy is coming to help this woman who her son has supposedly been taken by wolves, and you're like, okay. And you're in on it. And yeah, like you said, the first act, was really solid. It really got me interested. I wanted to see where this was going. And then it kind of leveled off. There were just some things where you're like, okay, like, I get it. It almost picked back up for me with the introduction of Alexander Skarsgård's character. I thought that was like a really good character introduction because it was interesting. Because it wasn't just, it was a little bit like, could go either way with it, you know? It's just him, and you're kind of like, you don't really know if he's a good dude or like a bad dude or what his thing is, you know? I really liked the character intro for him. But then, yeah, just kind of, it sort of leveled off. I don't think it ever got that bad, but it peaked early, and then it just kind of slowly went down, and it was fine. I liked it, you know, but it's probably not one that I'm going to go back to as much.
I was kind of wondering this as I was going through it, and I kind of wondered your thoughts. But so the initial mystery in the movie is what happened to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
They were thought to be taken by wolves, and then the script essentially abandons that mystery in favor of Riley Keough's character, who disappears. And the film becomes, where did she go? And I thought that was an interesting narrative decision, because I think that, you know, what happened to the kids is far more interesting than what happened to Riley Keough, because I thought she was, you know, the best, you know, actor in this film. And having her disappear for, you know, a majority of the second act didn't really lend well. Not to say that Jeffrey Wright can't, you know, carry a performance himself. He's very well known now for his performance in Westworld. I was a bit disappointed to see that he has, you know, the same confused look on his face that he had, you know, for the, you know, 15 episodes of Westworld consecutively. So it was a lot of confusion for him, and then, you know, a lot of just general brutality from Alexander Skarsgård. What did you think about the decision to kind of shift away from missing kids to missing, you know, wife?
Yeah, I hear your point, and I think you're right on there. I mean, it was like, you feel for the kid, and you're like, you know, there's not much of a better thing that a good hero could do than to go find a kid, you know. So you're like really invested in that, and I actually really liked the twist initially, but it did suffer from not having that character in the film as much anymore, because
the air kind of
it did
deflates,
because it really peaked there when you know that first mystery is kind of solved, and you're like when you're like, oh shit, wow, and then it just kind of deflates, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, I mean, maybe if we could have like gone away from, kind of like they did with Alexander Skarsgård's character, just kind of followed his story for a while, if we could have like maybe followed hers. But I get why they didn't, because narrative-wise, like, that makes more sense. But to your point, it might have been more interesting to follow her character, you know, between her character. But her motivations are meant to be kind of ambiguous as well. So, I mean, like I said, I get why they didn't do it. But, I mean, I don't know. Overall, like, I would recommend people to go see it. I mean, not go. You can stay in your house. It's on Netflix. But, I mean,
go to your couch.
Go to your couch. Turn on the telly. You know, it's a good movie. You know, it might be like a good introduction to Jeremy Saulnier for people who aren't as familiar with his work, because this movie asks less of you as an audience member. So maybe like if you're trying to introduce people into his films, this might be a good entry point, because it gives you like a taste of the medicine. But
I suppose Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was thinking. Yeah, this actually is probably a pretty decent entry point, because then I started thinking about, like, like, why don't you just watch Green Room? But then I'm like, oh man, Green Room's like a really
Yep.
that's a tough one too. Like,
Yeah, that's a big hill to get over.
but Green Room is much better.
Yeah, it is.
Just,
and I love Blue Ruin. I really love Blue Ruin, and Blue Ruin's
yeah.
is a slow burn, like you said too. But, yeah. So I mean, it's not like this was a poorly made film. It was just kind of not quite as, I don't know. It wasn't quite as intense as I hoped. Did you? I mean, this is kind of a whatever, but that scene when the guy all of a sudden has like a fucking huge machine gun in his attic, like an old school 50 cal machine gun. It seemed like I was like, this is a little bit ridiculous.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I was
especially,
like,
I mean, he wasn't wearing a mask either, so you know,
he wasn't a wolf guy.
I don't understand where he, like, you know, gathered just the animalistic, energy to, you know, just start shooting the entire police force.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a bad, it was a well-filmed shootout. I remember, like, watching it, being like, you know, Michael Mann would film a better shootout, but this is pretty close. I mean,
yeah, it's fine.
But it just felt out of place.
Sure. I guess, it didn't really feel earned in the sense of, you know, like Green Room is wildly, you know, over the top,
mm-hmm.
you know, just terrifically violent, but it all makes you're not asking why there's, you know, a machine gun in the attic. You know, it makes more narrative sense.
Yeah.
And I think that I think maybe that was one of the themes of the film is the
unpredictability.
Sure. It had to do with the masks and. Did you get any, like, weird, like, incesty rapes incesty vibes from...
Raped by someone in my family? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean...
It's a little off topic, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, from the Alexander Skarsgård's character and Riley Keough. Like, were they brother and sister?
No, I think they were married.
But were they brother and sister?
Oh.
That's what I was kind of wondering.
I don't know. I mean, they didn't specifically say.
Because she's, well, yeah, they don't really, like, say anything in this movie, but it was like, she says she's always known him. Okay. Yeah. Jeffrey Wright, like, finds the picture of them when they're really young. All the locals are like, yeah, they have a sickness. They look kind of similar.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They're basically like their own little wolf pack. She eats her young. She doesn't eat the young, but, you know, she...
Spoiler.
Yeah. She gets rid of the young just like a wolf pack. I don't know. I got this, like... Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't really thought of it, but, I mean, that could be...
It doesn't really matter, you know?
No, not really, yeah.
To be honest, like, it doesn't matter. It's not, like, that important. Like, yeah, if you hardly even pick up on it, like, who knows?
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That's all I have to say about Hold the Dark.
Yeah. Go see it.
We have other things to talk about,
So, other movies we've seen recently... we both saw separately, not together, but A Star is Born, directed by Bradley Cooper, starring Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga. Do you want to start on this, or do you want me to?
Sure. So this, I think this film needs less introduction. It's starring, Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
A remake of the Barbara Streisand
Which was a remake
film.
of the other one from the 50s.
Right, yeah, which is like, I'm not even going to pretend to know.
Right, no.
I think I've seen like maybe a quarter of the Barbara Streisand one with my mom.
Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand.
Yeah,
all I know.
yeah. So essentially, Bradley Cooper playing an alcoholic, stumbles across,
also a famous musician, a country singer.
Yes, doing I don't know, his best like Florida Georgia Line impersonation, like what is like pop rock country.
Yeah,
I didn't really know what the genre. Like I knew the genre.
It's definitely like arena country. I would say it's better than Florida Georgia Line, but
sure.
That's shots fired.
It's in that realm.
Yeah.
But stumbles across Lady Gaga. They instantly hit it off. She's uberly talented. And yeah,
but her big kryptonite is that she's ugly as sin, is what they keep saying in the movie. Which I was like, God,
sure,
she's not that ugly,
One of the most interesting parts about I guess we can just jump into what we thought. Everyone knows what this movie's about, but
yeah.
I was kind of shocked by the fact that I really didn't know what Lady Gaga looked like.
Sure. Yeah.
Like for her, she's essentially like one of like the 8 to 10 most influential / famous people in the world, and yet has this kind of facade of like the makeup and the outfits, and I've never it's a really interesting thing. I don't know. It's pretty fascinating, like how they casted this, because the only time you really like, oh yeah, that's Lady Gaga, is when she's on stage and she's singing, and it's and there's no mistaking it. It's just Lady Gaga. But otherwise, I thought she was really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you think?
Well, about the movie as a whole, like, I'll say, like, the first trailer that I saw, I'm gonna say it was maybe the best trailer of the year. I mean, I loved it, and it looked really good, and I'm a big Bradley Cooper fan, and so I was really excited to see what he could do behind the camera, and I gotta say, like, seeing it, I kind of loved it. And, I wasn't really sure if I was going to. And I don't think it's like a perfect movie, but I was in, man. I really like that first act was maybe perfect to me. Like, so much visual storytelling, not a lot of like setup, and I just got such a feel for those characters without really saying, and that's like, a little tangent here, but that's what I love about movies, and that's when movies are the most powerful. It's because that's a medium that can communicate visually, which gets, I don't know, for me it hits harder, and like I was all in, and it kind of like it peaked for me, and then in like the second act it middled off. It got a little less interesting once like the glitters were gone of the glam, of the rock life, when she's kind of getting ingratiated into it and kind of doing her own thing. It gets a little bit less, eccentric and otherworldly because she's part of it. So then the story kind of middles off too, which is natural, and I was fine. I was along for the ride. And then I thought it ended really well too. And I've noticed I just have a thing for, like, fake bands in movies. Like, I just love them. Like, Walk Hard, I'm convinced, is a really funny movie and a really good movie. And same with, like, Popstar. And, I don't know, like, I've downloaded some of the songs from this movie. I love them. I've listened to them a bunch of times. And
Sex Bomb.
Sex Bomb.
Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah,
Ba
that's a great.
Bomb,
yeah, Scott Pilgrim's another great
Bomb.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's I don't know. I love this movie. I unabashedly like, and there was like part of me was like at one point I was like, is Bradley Cooper like trying to do like a Sam Elliott impression right now? Like there were times, and then like a story arc in the movie was like.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Was like because I had that thought and I was like, well, that's a little weird. Like it sounds like he's trying to kind of do a Sam Elliott impression.
Yes,
and then a storyline in the movie was like he was sorry
stole my voice.
He stole his voice, and I was like, that is so awesome. I love that because he was. I mean, you could tell. I was like, that's a little weird. And then they were like, yeah, I'm sorry.
45 minutes of the film, it was my biggest complaint. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I from the trailer again, I knew, Sam Elliott, he doesn't. I don't think he shows up for a while, but
mm-hmm.
I knew he was in the film, and I'm like, he's blatantly ripping off, Sam Elliott, and it has to, something has to be said about it, and then they addressed it, and I was like, oh,
you're like, boom, perfect, great, let's move on, guys, that's awesome. Yeah, I agree. That was like my main thing too. Was I was like, dude, like. Don't try to do a Sam Elliott impression. Just do your own thing. But then, like, when that became a thing, I was like, that's awesome. It really worked well. And, I mean, there were... I'm sure if someone hated it and they threw out a bunch of points at me that, it was a little too fantastical. And some things were a little convenient. You probably have points on that. But, like, I really liked it. Like, there were a couple times where I was like, that seems a little bit, like, convenient. But at the same time, I didn't care because I was in. So, like,
I really appreciated the fact that it was one of the most, like, self-aware, like just like we said, it's Bradley Cooper doing a Sam Elliott impression, and it's such a self-aware film, but at the same time, it's like the most like Hollywood movie you can be. Like
it is.
They're just going for it. Type deal. I enjoyed the fact that it was a musical and it felt like a musical.
Yeah.
I was singing. I was humming like the tunes. For the next 2 days. Like.
Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. Sorry.
Yeah, I was pleased. I was pleased all around.
Yeah, and I really liked, and again, I really liked the ending. There's a line in there that Sam Elliott had where he was like, he used to say, I'm not going to do it, but he said like, there's only like 7 different chords that anyone plays in music, right? And we only have those 7 chords, and it's up to you to decide how you're gonna like arrange those chords to make it your own,
Sure.
And I was like, that resonated a lot with like even just the movie itself. Like this movie's been made a bunch of times, and it's like it's a pretty basic story, but they arranged it, in a different way, and I really liked it a lot. And I'm really excited to see what else Bradley Cooper does.
Yeah, so this was like, in my mind, this was like, like the heat check of all heat checks.
Yep.
Not only is he directing for the first time, but he's singing. I enjoyed his direction. I'll ask you, like, stage Bradley Cooper, like, are you in or out? Is he a good singer or not? Or is he just good enough?
I want to say the right answer is that he's just good enough, but fucking A, man, those songs, I was in. And him just singing with one guitar, like, I was in, and I was like, I would buy that record. Like,
the only time I was really like, oh, all right, was where he was like going toe to toe with Gaga, like the duets. Because that's when you kind of notice, like, I was like, oh, okay,
she's on another level. Yeah.
You should just like kind of let her go here.
Yeah. It worked for me, but I get what you're saying. Gaga is like, she is on another
by himself,
level.
I was like, all right, yeah, like I get this. I see what he's going for.
And I liked sorry, go ahead.
No,
just something.
Another question. I was wondering, is her turn to pop, in the film, is that like an indictment on like pop music, or
I mean, it could
an indictment on Lady Gaga? Like, is Lady Gaga playing this like character who's essentially herself? That like it doesn't come out and say that like her original thing was the best version of herself. Right. But
I think like I kind of picked up on. I don't know if it's like. I don't think they put it as a right or wrong answer, which I appreciated, but, like, it was kind of like when he said, like, people are listening to you now, and they're not going to be listening forever, so, like, say what you're going to say and make it, like, important, right? Because people are listening, and I feel like he's on the decline, and I feel like he kind of maybe is like, I probably could have become a bigger star and been able to have my career last longer, and if I would have, quote unquote, sold out a little bit more. But I feel like he just kind of, did the things. He's like he kept saying, I have something to say, and he said that, and it got him to a good level. But like, I think maybe it's like she just kind of didn't like chase the money, but just. It wasn't as important to her to have something to say as it was just being in the industry, and being there. And so she just kind of took what she could get and made it, and she became a huge star by tapping into that and kind of...
Whoa, spoiler.
Sorry. Not a star. She was not born a star.
Well, we'll edit that out,
Yeah, sorry, guys. All right, let's do the clean in.
Yeah.
I forgot what I said right before. She becomes a huge... Anyway. No, but I don't know. Like, that's an interesting point. Because I feel like part of what his inner demons was struggling with was, like, he had this, shitty childhood and had to try and remedy that. But I think he thought his saving grace was going to be, like, having something to say and getting in front of people to say it. I think that worked for a while, but then it kind of leveled off, and he was still that same person, and I think he was kind of like maybe it wasn't all about saying what I had to say, maybe whatever.
Yeah, and not to keep bringing up, Manchester by the Sea in every podcast that we do, but
no, I wanted to bring it up too.
we're just looking for ways to tie it in.
It's like the Manchester by the Sea extended mustard, universe.
I've got a take. It's got a little interesting twist. But yeah, the idea that people don't change overnight, or that they don't change in the hour and 40 minutes that we're with them on screen is can be very powerful, and it's people make very, very incremental changes, and it's extremely difficult, and there's no cure-all, you can't just.
There's not just one thing that's going to happen that's going to unlock.
Go to rehab everything for 6 months and then you're all good. It's a constant battle. So I really like the direction. I thought that the narrative choices that they made were true to the character, and and it's difficult to take in, but it's it felt earned, which I think is maybe the highest compliment when you're
it felt
dealing
really
with issues of addiction, anxiety, depression. So
the story felt really tight the whole way through. And I feel like something I just thought of too. I feel like when we said incremental change and one thing isn't gonna like unlock everything, like I feel like Bradley Cooper's character was like hoping that this like super talented woman that he like falls in love with, like having this love that I can share my life with is gonna like fix me, and then it like doesn't. He's still, even with that, like he thought maybe that was the one thing that was missing, was like a true connection, a true like relationship. Like that still didn't unlock him, It got close, but it couldn't quite do it, which I think is kind of interesting, but yeah, I wasn't sure. I was afraid that you were gonna just say like how much you hated it and how terrible it was, and I had to sit here and be like, you know what? I really loved it. Unfortunately,
it was a musical, and I liked the music, and I liked the characters, and that's I couldn't say the same thing about like for instance La La Land.
Yeah.
Like, can you just start like humming like some tunes from La La Land? Like you got one?
Bum 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 ba da ba da bum 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 ba da ba da ba da 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 da. That was the first one, but that's like the song. That's like the one song. Another Day of Sun.
Yeah, there's no words.
There's no words.
The great Bill O'Reilly. Like there's no words. Like Shallows is a banger.
That's Oh man, over and over.
Like that's a lock. That's a lock for best original song.
Fuji. And they say sha la 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 in that song, which normally I don't like when songs do that, but I was all in.
Oh, Lady Gaga takes some liberties with the non-words.
Yeah, she does.
When she closes the eyes and she grabs the mic,
you don't know what's happening.
A torrent of,
yeah, you're like,
I ate it up. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, cool.
Anything else?
Well, I just saw a movie this weekend.
Oh no, Star is Born.
Oh no, that's it.
I know we have other things, but
it was born. It was a star. Loved it, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna love it. I thought maybe this was gonna be another big bloated Hollywood thing that I wasn't in on, but I gotta say I really liked it a lot.
I agree.
All right, segue. I just saw a movie this weekend that just came out, Bad Times at the El Royale, which I was very excited for. And you haven't seen this, right?
No, I have not, but I can pretend to have seen it.
Okay. Well, I gotta say I was excited to see it, and it was one of those where it could go. It looked like, based on the trailers, it kind of looked like it could go either way. And I gotta say it was good. It was really good, but just good.
This is the Jeff Bridges one, right?
Yep, Jeff Bridges, Chris Hemsworth, Black Lady. I haven't seen her in anything else. I forget her name. Sorry. Dakota.
Dakota Johnson?
Yeah, that's it. 50 Shades of Grey girl.
Yeah.
John Hamm. And, good. Nick Offerman for a tiny bit. But yeah, I liked it. It was good. But, honestly, it's a little bit forgettable, Jordan, which is your number one critique of a film. Like, it had so much potential, but unfortunately, I couldn't help thinking, this feels like a Tarantino movie, and in the hands of Tarantino, it would just be so much better. Which isn't like a good critique of a movie. I understand that. But, like, it just kind of, I wanted them to play into, like, the novelty of that hotel a little bit more, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is kind of interesting. And then Jeff Bridges is the best part of it, I think. He's a fucking really good actor and really brings it.
It's a bold take.
Yeah, bold take. Yeah, he's fucking. I wouldn't. Yeah, but yeah, it was good. It's definitely one like I feel like if I hadn't seen any trailers, hadn't heard anything about it, and it was just on like HBO or something, I probably would have really liked it. But I kind of like had this expectation in my head of like, this looks like a fun thriller, like, and it was good. I like Drew Goddard, but it just kind of, the parts I liked about it is it didn't fuck around.
Sure, he was the Martian, right?
Drew Goddard, he did Cabin in the Woods, wrote and directed Cabin in the Woods, but Joss Whedon wrote it or something. I don't know.
Okay.
And some other stuff, but so it was good. I liked it, but it has a lot of potential, and it could have been like really, really good. I like that it didn't really fuck around. Like, it just kind of was boom, 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 move the story along. There wasn't a lot of wasted stuff, which I liked, but it just didn't quite gel 100% for me. Like, a lot of good pieces. It moved fast. I appreciated that. Like, there was actually some good character development in there. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was good, not great, I'll say.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Hot take.
Hot take.
Yeah. Have you seen any other ones recently?
So, I did have an interest in seeing Bad Times at El Royale because it just kind of looked interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen a trailer. I just kind of heard some hearsay.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges, Dakota Johnson, like sneaky good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready to make the case for Dakota Johnson. Outside of Shades of Grey, it's difficult to overcome just like those overpowering. I don't know. We've seen it a bunch of times. And Lord knows I'm the biggest Kristen Stewart fan on the planet, but yeah, no, I'll keep a lookout for it, even though, forgettable films, that's, those are bad for me.
And maybe it's just it could be because I sat next to a guy who was on a date, and, every little thing that the movie tried to, set up, it wasn't that subtle of a film, but there were a couple times where it didn't, spoon-feed you the thing, but it was obvious what they were, referencing. And every time it happened, he leaned over to his girl and was like, "Oh, see, that's why they did this." Or like, "Oh, they mean this." And I'm like, So that was annoying.
They need the key to open up room 306.
But remember, he dropped the key though. Yeah, and you're like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, this is the part where he goes and he gets more ice from them.
Yeah, it just. It's so annoying.
Yeah, so I guess I could throw it in there in the mildly forgettable.
Yeah.
It's getting close to Halloween, which means
my
Luke
favorite
and I will
holiday.
start just watching a stupid amount of horror films, which are gonna be any they're gonna range from the classics to the bads, the goods, the news, the let's maybe give it a shot. Maybe I missed it last year. I watched a film that was on Netflix. Again, I don't know, like Netflix, they just keep pulling me in with these films that pop up and they're right in front of my face, and I'm like, let's give it a shot. So I watched Malevolent. It's taken me like 7 times to say that word for some reason, but
but you did
the only reason I wanted to bring this up, Malevolent, is because the lead, Florence Pugh, is she's if you caught her in Lady Macbeth, she's playing Lady Macbeth.
I thought
I saw her in that.
Jessica Chastain.
No. Jessica Chastain's take on Macbeth would be wild, and she would 100% be wearing a pantsuit.
Oh yeah, no doubt. With shoulder pads.
18th century pantsuit.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'll date whoever I want. And I will sue your ass. But yeah, okay, so Malevolent, it's a horror film. It's more of a standard fare. Like I said, Florence Pugh's character, she and her brother, they go around masquerading as paranormal investigators. They don't mean to really believe in any of this stuff, and
hijinks ensue.
You never guess it, but they end up at a house that's got some weird stuff going on.
And maybe their beliefs change a little bit?
Oh, yeah, it's crazy, too. And, you get the backstory that, Elizabeth Pugh's character, her mother, was perhaps indeed herself the medium.
Oh, I thought you meant I thought you meant the daughter was the mother. It's like, whoa, that's a twist.
No spoilers here. But no, I just wanted to mention this one. It's not the worst thing you can pick on Netflix. It's certainly not the best. Face Off
holds that top.
That's always going to be the number one. So if you have a chance, just always pick Face Off. But
the nice thing about Face Off is it checks every genre box. Every genre you could want.
I gotta cut it off there.
we can't spend the rest of this podcast. No, we don't.
But it's just kind of like your standard horror film. You can do much worse, especially on Netflix. I thought it was interesting because I think Florence Pugh's performance is really actually pretty good. It's a weird. So you can maybe expand on this, but maybe I don't know, the Scream Queen title is maybe a tad dated now, but there's some characteristics that are it's really specific to the horror genre, and if you're not fulfilling those aspects, you kind of peg down on the lower end, like the Jessica Biel, Paris Hilton is kind of the lower spectrum of screen queens, whereas the higher is the Danielle Harris, Jamie Lee Curtis, is the OG. But I thought she was really good. She's a lot of the end of a horror film is just a still camera shot of the heroine or hero's face as they walk down an empty hallway, and she's more or less just kind of her body language inflections are interesting throughout. I think she's actually pretty talented as a whole, and I don't know, she was worth the price of admission. Her brother is a character, is kind of like a, poor man's Miles Teller, smart aleck type deal.
Okay.
So the film is interesting-ish only for her performance, if not other wildly predictable. Like I said, it's not the worst thing you could pick on Netflix, but if you're bored, maybe give it a shot. Interested to see where her career goes. I thought this was kind of fun. Yeah, I don't know. What else? What are there any interesting films that you are excited for as far as Halloween?
Yeah.
Besides Halloween,
right? Well, that's one of them. Yeah. I mean, like, First Man, I need to see here soon. That's not really a spooky movie.
So yeah, First Man.
So scary. No, like, obviously, like, well, since we brought it up, let's just talk about it. So, Halloween is coming up, the sequel, sort of, to the original. So they're kind of playing with timelines, X-Men style, where it's just like as if only the first Halloween happened, and then now it's, 40 years later? 50 years later? 40 years later?
You're acting as if they're just now wiping the slate, and this isn't like the third time Laurie Strode has come back from the dead. Like she's essentially like more inhuman than Michael Myers. But anyways.
Yeah, and I actually just rewatched the original Halloween from 1978 again, and hot take,
it's on my list.
It's really good still. And then just kind of watching that movie and seeing the behind the scenes on it, where they just kind of talked about, like, well, most horror movies at the time, like, took place at this haunted house at the top of this hill out on the outskirts of town. It's abandoned and
Haddonfield.
Yeah, and then this movie, they wanted to, like, put it in this safe small town, almost a suburb type feel, where everyone lived, and just show, like, and then, like, when you see it from that aspect, the movie, like, well, first when you see it, you're like, oh, so many movies have ripped this movie off,
Right.
But, like, when you see it, when I watched that behind the scenes, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. It makes sense why they, like, spend so much time setting up the town and setting up the characters, and, like, oh, it's just a normal girl who's, like, babysits and has these friends, and it just seems like a normal, town. And, yeah, hot take, it's really fucking good, so just go see it. But, like, John Carpenter's still a good director, and he directed this one that's, or not, he didn't direct it. Oh, I thought he did. No, it's directed by David Gordon Green.
No, yeah, he was on board with it the whole way, though, as, like, a special counsel.
Gotcha. Well, that's probably better than...
Yeah, I don't think I did a little bit of reading. I think, like, Blumhouse, like, wasn't gonna do it without, like, his blessing, and Jamie Lee Curtis, like, they both had to be in on it, and they were. Gotcha. They thought it was great. They liked the story, and so...
Gotcha.
Kind of a perfect marriage type deal.
Yeah, I like David Gordon Green. He's a good director. Does interesting stuff. But, yeah, I mean, based on the trailers, I'm like, you know what? It looks good. I don't know. Like, I don't know what else to say. The original's good. This looks good. I'm gonna see it. And I hope...
Yeah.
I mean, what I really hope is that it kind of, like... Because, like, Halloween is obviously dated at this point. The film and, like, some of the scares, like... They're good, but they're not, like, as, like... intense as we've seen. Like, not, like, jump scares, but, like... I mean, Halloween's not going to get to Hereditary levels of intense horror, I mean, which it doesn't need to be.
It was a film in the 80s that was, a no-budget horror film.
Right.
I mean,
So, I would just like to see it updated and just kind of see, like, if we can get like a little bit more like nowadays, kind of the almost like the handheld cam shots feel way more personal, and just kind of that style of I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential for this, that it could be really good. But I'm also like, don't want to get too excited for it. You know what I mean? Because there's a good chance that it fucking sucks. Like, Halloween is not a good franchise. Like, the first one was great, and there's no other ones that are really comparable. So I don't know. We'll see. Are you all in on this?
I'm all in. There's like a few in there that I kind of like. Like I kind of ride for H2O.
Really?
As funny as that sounds. In H2O, like it's almost like it's not good to the point where you're kind of like rooting for Michael Myers,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I don't know if that was like meant to. I don't know if that was like an objective, but we'll see. I really haven't seen anything about it ever. I don't even really think I've seen more than just like a 10-second teaser trailer, but
yeah,
I'm in. I'm down. Let's do it.
So, other than the original Halloween, so like I have my 4th annual Halloween party coming up in a couple weeks. Halloween's my favorite holiday. Fall's my favorite season. I love it. Are there any movies that you gravitate back to, or ones that maybe people haven't seen that you would recommend to really get them in the Halloween spirit?
So let's go. So first off, we were just talking about it, but Halloween is that's like the staple.
Yeah.
I actually have the DVD, so I just watch it every year.
Boom.
You watch Jaws on 4th of July. You watch Halloween on Halloween.
Yeah.
That's what it is. As far as ones that people maybe haven't seen, it's a good question. Did you have one in mind?
I have a couple.
Okay. You talk, and I'll think.
Okay. Well, there's
So I'm trying to think of things that we haven't talked about on the podcast.
Right. There's a couple that I've like The Wolfman from 1941 is one that I see every year. I love it. Black and white, great film. I don't know if a lot of people go back and watch it, but that's one that I go back to every year. I fucking love it. I also love to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks meet the Wolfman for some reason. I have to watch that every year, which I also enjoy. One that I've seen recently that I think it's gotten a little bit of a cult following, and I think it's a little bit more popular now, but it's called Trick or Treat. It's a horror anthology film. I don't know if you've seen that. But it's...
I don't think I have.
It's really good.
I think I've heard of it, though.
It's really, really good, and it's just so Halloween. You're instantly in the spirit, and it's interesting because it's a couple different segments that kind of flow through, and they're directed by different directors, and it's really fun because they're just a bunch of short little horror type things that it's, as I'm sure people have seen horror anthology movies before, but Trick or Treat is really, really good, and that's like a modern classic. Like that's a new one that I'm gonna watch every year on Halloween because it's really, really good.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably like one that's like could be up there for like the gold standards. Hocus Pocus is one that I always go back to from my childhood. I will put that on and instantly Halloween Town, love Halloween Town, love Halloween Town 2, Calabar's Revenge. I'm in on those for sure.
You want to talk about forgettable?
Yeah. What I will say though is there's one that's like it's not necessarily like a Halloween one, but a good like horror anthology. While I was on the topic of that, is like Tales from the Hood. Is actually really good, and that's like a bunch of horror anthology. And it takes place around like the ghetto and like hood.
Really good.
Like really.
I thought like Phantom Thread was really good.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument that could be made that this could be better.
It's okay, but...
Yeah. I mean, there's, Phantom Thread was, he likes dresses and stuff, but...
Okay. I think I got a couple here. So I was thinking... you can pick either one, Let the Right One In, or Let Me In. Vampire Story, one starring Chloe Grace Moretz. That's one that's... It's kind of cool. It's a kind of cool film because both of them are pretty good. Have we talked about those movies here? I don't think so.
Not much. I think we probably maybe did on our remakes episode a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, shoot. So that was one that came to mind. If you want to go like old school, The Fly, not the original, but the remake, with Jeff Goldblum. Yeah. That's a good one. I kind of like those 80s, anything that's like a kind of body horror,
Yeah.
Type.
A good 80s
Carpenter
one.
did a bunch of it, with like, singing and stuff like that too, which is, great.
That makes me think when you say 80s, the original Fright Night is good. I actually like the remake too, but...
Yeah, it's okay.
The original?
Not my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, it puts me in that mood, It's like a good 80s horror movie,
Yeah.
It just has
it's
that
better
shit.
It's probably better than like Friday the 13th or
I think it is.
Like a movie that's gotten that gets way more publicity just because the big baddie is better. But trying to think of some other ones. Good horror films.
The Conjuring is very good. That's a newer one, but that was kind of a modern classic because it checks all the boxes. Sure. And if you want just a streamlined, really good horror movie, that's a good one to just throw on. It's a crowd pleaser.
Sure. Vera Farmiga, she's.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's what I was trying to get at with talking about Malevolent, but just that the emotion and the fear and I don't even know the gambit of feelings that you can just see in her face as she's going through these, whatever she's going through, talking to the boogeyman. That's kind of what I look for in a scream queen, even though she's not quite in that category, but yeah.
What made me think of too is The Woman in Black. While not a great movie, I love it, and that's just that one
Scream King.
Is Daniel Radcliffe does a really good job, and that's that's a movie that has a really good setup for a horror movie. It's a fun ride to be on, and it's legitimately really scary. I mean, the whole movie does hinge on the whole don't go in there trope, but it's a really fun ride if you just want
Speaking of
go for it.
Speaking of don't go in there, Jennifer's Body.
I've never seen that.
You're going to be shocked to hear this, but I actually kind of like it.
Wow. That's Megan Fox, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
She eats boys.
Okay.
A classic don't
succubus?
Go in there.
Yeah.
And, use your imagination.
Sure.
Jennifer's Body. I'm trying to think. Well, now I've really set myself up for the 26 movies that we're not going to mention, and I did mention Jennifer's Body, so there we go.
So we'll just end it on that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want, Face Off, if you really want to get in the Halloween mood, that's a good one for it, too. It's a good costume one, but...
Again, that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah, we can't get into. But... Alright, well, hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode. You can find us on Twitter, me at LukeLarson89, at L Squared Podcast, on Facebook, L Squared Podcast. You're listening to us on SoundCloud or YouTube. Definitely check out our episodes we did with Jenna Sorali, David Mayer, and Quinn Costello, and look out for the interviews we have coming up. Old legs, you want these fools to find you?
They'll find me all in good time.
All in good time. Alright, well, till next time, have a happy Halloween. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.